Hi, and welcome to the Behavioral Business Blueprint, where we dive into the world of behavioral health entrepreneurship. Today's guest is no stranger to the mental health field. He has over 25 years working in the applied behavior analysis field. The founder and owner of LifeSkills Behavioral Services, Dr. Terrence Bryant. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Arthur. I appreciate it.
You have done this a lot over the years, just working in ABA. So I'm curious, what got you into this field?
It kind of started on a personal note because I have an older sister that she has intellectual disabilities, and she was later as an adult diagnosed with autism as well. But
Hmm.
earlier in I guess, in our relationship when we were growing up, she was very different, of course, from many of my peers and other family members. And there was always a curiosity about why she was the way she was, why she developed at a different trajectory than everybody else, and just trying to have an understanding about her. And I think those things, even though I didn't initially start in terms of my educational process in ABA, there was always burning questions about her and our relationship and why what made her different, what made her motivations a little different from typical individuals. And I started out my education in in a pre med as a biology pre med major. Was
Wow.
doing very well in that capacity. Things were progressing along, and somewhere about a couple of years in, I took a psychology course with a focus on intellectual and developmental disabilities. It just kind of just came rushing back all the questions I had. When as I was learning and and reading and researching for that particular course. And I just switched my major to psychology with an emphasis on intellectual disabilities and some of the clinical things related to that. And that's where it kind of started. As far as just really learning and developing my understanding of the field and my skills and all of those things. So it kind of started out personal. Then I kind of went in some other directions, but it drew me right back to wanting to understand her better. So it was kind of more of that. That's what started me out.
So it sounds you have a deeper meaning in this field because it touches home. It's personal to you. And I mean, 25 years of anything is a long time, but for ABA, which is still, I guess some people say it's in its infancy, what have you seen change over the years since you've been in the field?
Um, well, I think just sort of like the folks, because they look at ABA as primarily a field that addresses issues with autism and related disorders like that. I've seen it. I've seen ABA. It kind of it's changed, but it hasn't changed in many ways. I feel like the field has a need for more growth. It's been a long time that ABA. You say it's in its infancy, but it's been around really as a practice since the '70s,
Yeah.
which is a good amount of time. I was born in the '70s, 1970, but so I'm we're talking 50 years, over 50 years now, or close to 50 years for ABA. And but I think I would have to say some of the populations that we deal with, because autism itself has changed in terms of the features of that particular
Mhm.
diagnosis. It was just more of a sort of it didn't catch as many folks because it was just strictly specific constraints on what's called autism. What's called we called it Asperger's on some level, or we called it autism, or we called it something else, pervasive developmental disabilities. We kind of had little categories, but when we started looking at it years ago on the spectrum, it opened up the doors for a lot of folks who had those needs that may not be getting addressed because they didn't fall into one of those neat little boxes that we used to be in. So I think we're helping. We're exposed to a lot more people. Many people as adults get diagnosed later in life with autism. They didn't understand why they couldn't function properly or what was going on or why they were different. And even in those situations, and I worked with some of them previously, when they got the diagnosis that they were on the autism spectrum and they got the right treatment, it just allowed for them to say, understand themselves better and go, oh, wow, this is what I've been struggling with. And now these therapists are able to help me understand to live my life better and things like that. I think it just catches. We address now. I think the change, to answer your question, is that we're able to address folks, so many more folks who have these needs than we used to back when we were all tied up into those neat little boxes. You had to fit in this little box
Hmm.
to receive services. So I think now we're growing because we're able to expose ABA to so many more people who need it, who were excluded previously because they didn't fit the label quite right. If that makes sense.
So, what got you into starting LifeSkills Behavioral Services? And are you working with adults, kids, teens, or just a mix of all?
I'm working primarily with kids and adolescents and young adults up to the age of 21. So the vast majority of the clients that I serve are fall in that age group, basically 0 to 21. We do a little bit of early intervention, younger than 3, but most of our clients are fall into that adolescent to young adult range.
And is this with insurance, or are we just dealing with private pay, or just a mix of both?
Primarily insurance. There's a couple of private pay, but mostly insurance. And most of it is the state plan Medicaid insurance.
Okay.
There are a couple of private insurances as well that we have. Thought about trying to get into having more insurance private insurance companies that work through some of those panels and the time it takes to get on them, and some of those things I've kind of not pursued it because it takes a lot of upfront investment or on your part as far as being able to pay staff until you can get credentialed through those panels and all of that. So I've had a few, like about 3 other insurances, private insurances that right now that I have going on, but most of the other ones I haven't, you know, um, really gotten into those yet.
Yeah, and it does take some time, but I'm happy to hear that you do take Medicaid, because if I talk to a lot of other people, they're going to say the complete opposite. So many people shy away from it for various reasons, and I hate when I hear that, because I know the most vulnerable kids and adults, they have Medicaid or they're on the Med waiver. So to hear that you're doing that, it's needed, and we need more people to do that. Now, I have to address, you're when I heard your name the first time I met you, somebody said, "Do you know Dr. Terrence Bryant?" I've been in the field maybe 7 years. I don't meet many African Americans in the field of ABA. So then when you put a doctor in front of it, it's like, really? It's just, you don't hear that a lot. And I'm just curious, over the years, have you seen an increase in the diversity of our field of ABA, or is it just about the same, from what you've been seeing over the years?
I would have to say there's been a little bit of an increase.
Okay.
I remember starting out, and I'll say I started out. My experience probably goes a little longer than 25 years because when I first started my internship process, I used to do. I was what was called a behavior programming specialist at a state facility, and I was in the process of getting my master's degree at the time, or starting my master's program. And it was you really just didn't find anybody. I didn't know, especially from a male perspective, a black male. I didn't know any black males who were in the field, other than myself. And I think I heard of one person I never met, or something like that. But it was a few black females, but mostly it was not. We weren't very present in terms of our presence in the field. And that was at a state ICFMR facility, but the majority of professionals were white professionals. Um, and as I started becoming, in terms of becoming a BCBA, when the credential came about in 2000, I was probably one of the first in that round of getting credentialed overall in that process. I knew a few people, colleagues who were maybe myself and a couple other colleagues who were African American, but very, very few.
Yeah,
Um,
this
but
is
as
a
the
hidden
years came
field.
along, it's been a few more, but not enough, not nearly enough. It's still very low in terms of the frequency of individuals, minorities, especially African Americans, in the field.
Yeah, and I'm thankful for things like Black Men in ABA, or also known as BMBA, because I'm meeting more in the field. And it's so hard, when you go to work, to see people that look like you. And again, I mean, I haven't been in the field that long, maybe 7 or 8 years, and I'm still always surprised when my major is special education, in my master's in special education. I'm like, I had never heard of this until towards the end of my master's program. All the years of undergrad, never heard of ABA. And then just to see how big it's grown within 10 years. And now I hear it all the time. Oh, you hear special education, you also hear ABA. I'm like, it's just coming out of nowhere. So I love to see that the field is growing. So I also want to know, with starting your business, what is probably one of the biggest hurdles that you ran into?
The biggest hurdle probably was within myself, to be honest with you, because and I continue to struggle with it, but I have an understanding of it more now than I used to. I started out, of course, as a clinician first. So my mindset was I had a passion for what I did. Like I told you earlier, my sister, was sort of my motivation for getting into the field. And my whole mindset was, as a clinician, how can I be the best clinician that I can be? How can I be highly trained and receive the skills I need to be able to help people, with certain conditions? I was not a businessman by any stretch of the imagination. So the biggest hurdle is just understanding business. I mean, because most of us as behavior analysts, we're trained to be clinical, and to operate from the clinical perspective. But when you're starting a agency or some kind of a business related to ABA, you really need to have um, understanding of the need for a business plan. The need to understand how credentialing process work and funding and things like that. So my biggest hurdle in the beginning was when I first started, I just did not set that thing up the proper way. I didn't develop a business plan. I didn't. I just say I wanted to be able to do this on my own, not work for a company and just directly give services and kind of operate from my own perspective in terms of how I deliver services. But the business part was very lacking in terms of being structured the right way, and organizing and planning and things like that. So the biggest hurdle was just starting out as that clinician mindset without any understanding of business and not kind of setting my pieces up the way that would allow my business to really thrive the way it should.
Mm.
I think if that makes sense. I think
Yeah,
that might be a big hurdle for anybody who's just more of a clinician who wants to start a business is probably organizing and setting that business plan up the right way so that you're structured to be able to operate the way you should.
yeah. I always say experience is definitely the best teacher, but it's not fun when you're going through that experience.
Experience
and
hurts. Experience hurts. Sometimes it hurts
yes,
oftentimes.
uh, yes, mentally and I feel like physically too. That feeling in your stomach, like, ugh, I wish I would have known that. With
Yes.
all that you've learned, do you offer any kind of mentorship or anything? Just talking to people with the advice that you might have.
Yeah, I've done that. Not on a very organized kind of level. We have had. It's interesting you say that because with the BMBA,
Hmm.
we're kind of starting to forge out a mentorship kind of program to help certain mentees, individuals who are getting into the field and breaking in. Just being there, as a model and offer advice to those individuals. Something that myself and a lot of people like myself have never had the fortune to have. We had a discussion last night, a meeting regarding that and how we're going to set the program up and some of the ways in which we're going to offer ourselves to these individuals. Um, but yeah, here and there along the way, through supervision relationships with other clinicians, who I kind of help develop and get them started in the field, and just being there for advice and things like that. I've offered mentorship over the years, but I'm really excited about having a plan in which we can uh, just disseminate things about our own experiences to people who are coming in, who look like us, who are coming into the field. That's going to be pretty exciting because it helps. I think it'll help get them on the right foot as they come
Yeah,
in.
and mentorship is so important. I was fortunate enough to have a mentor when I started off with the ABA business. And now when I look back at things, I'm like, if I had done it myself, I'd have had a lot more pain.
Right, very important.
um, but
And I should say
doc,
too, my
mhm.
my mentors didn't look like me. There were people in the department. Yeah, I had a couple of mentors. One, Dr. Jeannie Golden, she was so valuable to me in the beginning and just getting my foothold in the field and understanding certain things. Um, but she didn't look like me. And I think that just seeing, even though we don't have a large presence in the field, like we were talking about earlier, just seeing that there are other people who kind of look like you and may share similar experiences that is very important. So this group, BMBA, I think can be so important to individuals like ourselves, who look like ourselves, and have more of a shared experience. It's just going to be something that be so valuable to professionals as they come into the field.
Yeah, it does. It makes a difference, especially when you're working with the learners, is what I've found over the years. I didn't think it really mattered at first with diversity, even though I was a teacher when it came to ABA. I just kind of just thought that doesn't matter, and it does make a difference because you can learn from each other. I remember just working with various families, working with a Spanish speaking family, and we have these things called ethics. And at the time, we didn't have this less than $10 rule, and I'm sitting there confused over water. And then I had an analyst that was from that culture, Spanish speaking culture. She's saying it's very disrespectful that you won't take the water. And I
Yeah,
said, and I'm just like, oh, well, I didn't know. I'm just trying to follow the rules. I said, I'm new to this. So it makes a huge difference.
yeah. You know, it was what's interesting that you say that because I'm trying to do a little research in cultural implications in the delivery of ABA services. So a lot of my just from my own experiences in delivering services as well as seeing others, the impact of culture and how culture plays a role, and your lack of understanding of different cultures can hinder or your delivery of ABA services. I'm doing some research with an emphasis just on that cultural implications in the delivery of ABA, and a lot of our
so
recent ethics have been, we're moving it a little bit, even though not enough, but a little bit into how do we approach cultural scenarios. Like we talked about accepting gifts. There was a time where accepting gifts was a no altogether in our ABA ethics. Now it's leaning toward, well, what conditions might you accept the gift from someone? Because we've hit roadblocks in certain cultural families when we turned down gifts because we were trying to follow the hardline no gifts thing with the ethics code. Now the ethics code is kind of being revamped and reshaped to consider culture a little bit more, even though we got a long way to go. But go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean. I
no,
just
no,
jumped
no.
when
I said
you
I'm
said I jumped in
excited
because we're talking about it.
to see where we go with the ethics, especially as we look at just diversity in the field, because it makes a huge difference. And I think we're finally realizing this, even though we've been around for a while. I say infancy, but compared to other fields, we haven't been around as long. But we're just now
Absolutely.
touching on this, and I look at other ethics from other fields. I'm like, they touched on this 20 years ago, and we're just now getting
Yeah.
to it. I'm happy regardless. It needs to
Yeah.
happen
Well,
eventually.
comparatively speaking, we are a very young field compared to other fields for certain. We're trying to kind of find our way where others have been around and established and kind of found their way a little bit ahead of us. So yeah, most definitely, I definitely understand that point.
Well, Dr. Bryan, if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to get to you?
Well, right now, I mean, my IG, Terrence Bryant. I'm sorry, Doctor Terrence Bryant, and you know, I wouldn't necessarily. I mean, I have my business line as far as my phone number, but my LifeSkills Behavioral um, um, .com is my website, so we reach through there as well. And you know, for my direct line as far as my business, 407 454 um, call, text. Those are pretty much the main uh,
Well, thank you so
avenues.
much for your time this morning. And if you have any questions, listeners, please just reach out to the Behavior Business Blueprint. Arthur Hairston. I am always on LinkedIn. Have a great day.
Have a great day.